We're seeing this through a thermal sight. As the tanks move forward to the berm, which is the boundary between the Gaza Strip and Israel, you can see tanks taking out targets. They're also supported by drones. Now, this is a new development really taken from Ukraine, where every tank has a drone tethered to it, which is seeing where the fall of shot goes and supporting it. But the great thing about the Merkava as well is it's very unique. It carries infantry in the back. There are probably 4 or 5 special forces operators in the back of these Merkava tanks. So what they're looking for, I expect, is anti-tank positions, key Hamas nodes, and no doubt entrance to the massive tunnel network that sits under Gaza. They look pretty professional to me. It can be quite daunting operating like this at night, but they're moving well and appear to be hitting the targets that they're destined for.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio. I'm James Hanson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by former British Army officer Hamish de Bretton Gordon, a former commander of the Royal Tank Regiment. Hamish served on operations during the First Gulf War in Cyprus, Bosnia, Kosovo, Iraq and Afghanistan, and he's commanded main battle tanks for around 24 years. Hamish, thank you so much for joining us today on Frontline.
Pleasure.
I want to start just by viewing some footage. The Israeli Defence Forces released footage of a raid involving several tanks and a bulldozer going into Gaza. Let's just have a look at it.
Okay, well, what we're seeing here is probably a squadron of Merkava tanks supported by armoured bulldozers and also some armoured personnel carriers. They're doing what we call recce by force or recce by fire. Operating at night because that's where they have advantage. They have excellent night sights, and actually we're seeing this through a thermal sight. As the tanks move forward to the berm, which is the boundary between the Gaza Strip and Israel, you can see tanks taking out targets. They're also supported by drones. Now, this is a new development really taken from Ukraine, where every tank has a drone tethered to it, which is seeing where the fall of shot goes and supporting it. But the great thing about the Merkava as well is it's very unique. It carries infantry in the back. There are probably 4 or 5 special forces operators in the back of these Merkava tanks. So what they're looking for, I expect, is anti-tank positions, key Hamas nodes, and no doubt entrance to the massive tunnel network that sits under Gaza. They look pretty professional to me. It can be quite daunting operating like this at night, but they're moving well and appear to be hitting the targets that they're destined for. And it's a good example of what we call combined arms maneuver, combined arms warfare, tanks and infantry, artillery and air power, all working together and are working in a format that you would reckon they're pretty well trained.
So, Hamish, just to go through some of the pieces of kit we're talking about here, starting with the Merkava tanks, just tell us a bit more about those and how do they compare to, say, the Challenger 2 tanks?
Well, the Merkava is an excellent tank, very well protected, 120mm smoothbore gun, accurate out to about 2 kilometres. As we can see, they also have excellent night sights to be able to operate during darkness or when obscuration is very, when it's not very clear. Unique to the Merkava, they have a passage, an area in the back where infantry or special forces can be housed. And in this sort of operation we're seeing here, which is, I'm sure a special forces operation, we know there are a lot of special forces operations going on at the moment, that would allow these people to get out and recce on the ground as well. Merkava's been around for a while. I think we're up to Mark 4 or 5 now, but they really are. When they are equally the match of the Challenger 2 or the Leopard 2 that we're seeing in Ukraine at the moment. And the Israeli Defence Force have a lot of them. The Israeli Defence Force are synonymous with tank warfare. 1967 war and other wars, it was actually the Israeli tanks that made the difference. So they are a highly trained, really effective tank soldiers. And we're seeing again that they haven't lost any of those skills. And although a lot of people thought the tank was well past its sell-by date. Actually, we're seeing in Ukraine, that they can make a real difference when used properly.
And tell me about using these tanks in addition to the drones, how they complement each other.
Yeah, the use of drones and tanks working together is quite a new thing. Now that we have what we call $500 drones, these are cheap drones that basically can operate up to 4 or 5 kilometers away from their base station. They carry a really high quality camera that is also a night camera, can be thermal vision. What we saw in Ukraine is each tank has one of these drones tethered to it. So the commander of the tank, not only will he be seeing through his own tank sights, he'll also be able to see what the drone is looking at, which is 4 or 5 Ks in front. And that gives him sort of almost 4 dimensions. He's looking down from the top of the target, he's looking laterally, and he will also be using a lot of other intelligent sensors as well. So very, very effective way of fighting. And, for those they're attacking, really difficult because, with the sound of tanks rumbling in the distance, the terrorists on the ground won't hear the drone, I expect, and certainly won't be able to see it at night. So this is something that the Israelis and no doubt the British and the Americans will pick up from the Ukraine war, because the Ukraine tank soldiers are operating in a similar fashion very, very effectively as well.
And then the bulldozers, these are D9 bulldozers. Would these be routine in an operation like this?
Absolutely, quite unique to the Israelis. Certainly in the British military, we have bulldozer tanks, in effect a Challenger 2 tank with a bulldozer blade in front of it. Although the Royal Engineers in the UK do have bulldozers, they're not so heavily armoured as the tanks. So as you see in this picture, the armoured bulldozers are going in front of the tanks to create a passage through the berm that has been created, and also displacing any mines that might be there. So fairly unique to the Israelis, but again, very effective, basically clearing the ground so that the tanks can then steam through without being affected by this great mound of earth, and also any mines that might be in that earth.
And Hamish, we know that much of Israel's army is only recently mobilised. From that footage that we've seen, does it look like a smooth operation?
Yeah, it does. It looks pretty smooth. I expect these are regular soldiers, and I expect these are special forces soldiers. Doing a complex operation like that is something in the early stages of training would be beyond reserves or people who are called up. So they look pretty effective. From what I understand, the operation lasts several hours. They didn't take any casualties. They counted them all out and all back, as it were. And in a very complex area like the Gaza Strip, at night, in difficult terrain, using lots of assets like drones, bulldozers, and tanks all together, that shows to me that these are probably, some of the very best soldiers that the IDF have.
I suppose the bigger picture is that we're still waiting for what we think might be a ground invasion. People keep talking about an imminent ground invasion, but we don't know. It may not be for several weeks. It may never come. We don't know. One of the bits of mood music coming out of Washington seems to be that the White House is urging caution on the part of the Israeli government, in part because they've got military intelligence, it's suggested, that shows that maybe the military task is harder in Gaza than originally thought, that the tunnelling network that Hamas have built in Gaza will be harder than first thought for the Israelis to deal with. What do you make of that assessment?
Yeah, no, I'm sure they're right. I've just written a piece exactly on this. Although I haven't fought in tunnels myself, I'm well aware of the extent of the Gaza tunnel system. I mean, it is vast. Some tunnels are the size where only a person could squeeze through, others the size you can drive a truck through it. And they are very, very extensive. There are so many variables in this conflict going on at the moment that I'm sure the US wants to prevent. Number one, prevent escalation, prevent the Iranians getting involved. The Russians are they've got various proxies in the area. And also I think the Israeli military are biding their time. And we see the operation last night. They are trying to what we call shape the battlefield. They want as much intelligence and information as they can possibly get, because they are hunting down 30,000 Hamas terrorists who are hiding amongst 2.3 million civilians. And of course, they want to get the terrorists and not get the civilians. When it comes to the hostages, which is the first priority of the IDF to rescue, I think everybody's pretty sure that most of them are underground in these tunnels. Now, for the Israelis to get in there, that is complex. They have highly trained special forces operators to do this task. We're hearing of new weapons that they have, sponge bomb to isolate various areas of the tunnels. And they'll also be heavily reliant on drones. Some drones so small that you can't see with the naked eye. But even so, this is a really, really complex and challenging operation. And of course, the Israelis want to get the hostages out, but if they get the hostages out at the cost of many casualties of their own and many civilian casualties, that will really be a major detriment to Israel and all its allies. So I'm sure that it is right that the US are urging caution. We're hearing a lot of negotiations going on at the moment with the Qataris and others, the possibility to get hostages released. Even big talk about maybe Hamas will be removed from Gaza as the PLO were back in the 70s. So an awful lot of stake here. I'm sure if the Israelis can avoid fighting to get the hostages back, Sun Tzu said, the great philosopher, military philosopher, said that the art of warfare is to win without fighting. And if they can do that, all the better. But I think ultimately, Hamas need to be aware, and I'm sure they are aware, that the Israelis are prepared to get in the ground and fight for every of their hostages. But if there is any way it can be done without fighting, then I think everybody in the world would support that.
Do you think, given that, Hamish, in the meantime, we can expect more operations like the one we saw last night?
Absolutely. We're aware that there are a lot of special forces operations going on, probably with small units of special forces going through the wire across the border, doing reconnaissance, no doubt also doing kill operations on Hamas terrorists, and I'm sure that will continue. I'm sure operations like the one we saw last night will continue. Again, what the Israelis need is as much intelligence as they can possibly get, so that they can attack those people that they want to attack. In other words, the Hamas terrorists. They can rescue the hostages, but with the minimum of collateral damage and the minimum of civilian casualties. There will become a time, though, I expect, when if negotiations and mediation are not successful, that the Israelis will commit. And as I think everybody's well aware, they've got about 400,000 troops being ready for this. They've got hundreds of tanks, hundreds, if not thousands, of drones, a lot of air power as well. So they do have overwhelming force, which they can use. But of course, if they can avoid using that to rescue their hostages and neutralize Hamas, then that is, I think, what everybody on the planet would wish for.
You say that the Israelis will be hoping to gather more intelligence. Realistically, though, Hamish, how much more intelligence can they gather in maybe a few more weeks, however long they're prepared to delay this expected ground invasion? Because given Israel already has some of the most advanced intelligence services in the world, wouldn't they have gathered much of this information already?
Well, they will have a lot of information and intelligence, but the battlefield changes all the time. Things are moving, and of course, Hamas will not be staying static, as it were. They'll be moving around. They'll be trying to deceive the Israeli intelligence. So, you never have enough intelligence. You never know 100% of what's going on. So there will be lots of methods. We've seen the recce's that we've seen, recce's by force that we've seen. There will be signals intelligence, satellite intelligence. No doubt there'll also be what we call human intelligence, spies trying to build a picture. So this will continue. I'm sure Israeli Defense Force commanders will want as much as they can get, and they will keep hoovering it up until the time either that there is a negotiated settlement, or in the worst case, the Israelis have to put boots on the ground, tanks and troops into Gaza and into those tunnels.
And were this conflict to escalate further, and for instance, were Hezbollah to become formally involved to Israel's north, do you think that Israel has the resources to fight on two fronts currently?
Yes, I think they probably do. Israel has a massive army, supplemented by all the reservists and people coming from all over the world, Jews from all over the world coming back to fight in Israel. And they have a lot of hardware. So I don't think there is any concern that they couldn't fight on two fronts. Hezbollah is another terrorist organization like Hamas. And to fight terrorists, number one, you need great intelligence. Number two, you need high-tech weaponry, precision weaponry to take them out. And number three, you need soldiers, and lots of them. So Israel has all of that. No doubt they've been stockpiling a lot of weaponry, and it would appear that the Americans are also giving them a lot of ammunition. So I don't think they're going to run out of ammunition, soldiers, or weaponry. So they would be perfectly prepared to fight on two fronts. Now, they don't want to do that, I'm sure, and I think we in the international community don't want that to happen. The chance of escalation beyond Israel, if they are fighting on two fronts, particularly against Hezbollah, who are in effect the Iranian proxy, although Iran is also armed and providing ammunition to Hezbollah. And Israel, I am sure, would not stand back from attacking Iran either. And that is, again, something that I'm sure that the US wants to avoid. So, yeah, I don't think anybody should be any doubt the Israelis couldn't fight on two fronts. But again, because it then makes the chance of escalation that much higher, the international community needs to try and make sure that situation doesn't occur. But if it does, yeah, I'm sure the Israelis will still be able to persevere on that and neutralize Hezbollah, as well as neutralizing Hamas.
Just finally, Hamish, obviously we know that Hamas rocket attacks on Israel are continuing. Now, in Ukraine, we saw that despite having significant Western air defences, Russian strikes were still able to penetrate. Does Israel have enough air defences to shoulder these sustained attacks?
Well, air defence is not really my area of expertise, but from what I understand and how it is working at the moment, they do. We also know that the US is putting a lot of its own air defence assets into the region, not least to protect its own military in the region. But these things are always finite. But from what I understand at the moment, yeah, they probably have the ammunition to keep those air defences going for some time.
Hey, Mr. Bretton Gordon, we always appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for joining us on Frontline.
Pleasure.
Thank you for watching this episode of Frontline for Times Radio. For more on the war in Ukraine, subscribe to the Times Radio YouTube channel, listen to Times Radio on your digital radio, or you can read the Times online with your digital subscription or in print. Thank you and goodbye.